cool. Cool. So all the material models described previously are designed to simulate dense surfaces both at a macro and micro level. Clothes and fabrics are...
Wait, are you recording?
Oh yeah, it just started,
Sorry.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Clothes and fabrics, however, are often made of loosely connected threads that absorb and scatter incident light. The microfacet BRDFs presented earlier do a poor job of recreating the nature of cloth due to their underlying assumption that the surface is made of random grooves that behave as perfect mirrors. When compared to hard surfaces, cloth is characterized by a softer specular lobe with a large fall-off and presence of fuzz lighting caused by forward and backward scattering. Some fabrics also exhibit two-tone specular colors, for example, velvets. Figure 29 shows how traditional microfacet BRDF fails to capture the appearance of a sample of denim fabric. The surface appears rigid, almost plastic-like, and more similar to a tarp than a piece of clothing. This figure also shows how important the softer specular lobe caused by absorption and scattering is to the faithful recreation of fabric. So you've got something that looks like that pleather, like the vinyl material, and then you get something more like cloth.
It's very shiny clothes.
Okay, so velvet is an interesting use case for a cloth material model, as shown in Figure 30 here. This type of fabric exhibits strong rim lighting due to forward and backward scattering. These scattering events are caused by fibers standing straight out from the surface of the fabric. When the incident light comes from the direction opposite to the view direction, the fibers will forward scatter the light. Similarly, when the incident light from the same direction as the view direction, the fibers will scatter the light backwards. So, interesting. You've got your, yeah. It's kind of a weird behavior. Yeah. Never really thought about how you would model that. Yeah, so since fibers are flexible, we should, in theory, model the ability to groom a surface. While our model does not replicate this characteristic, it does model the visible front-facing specular contribution that can be attributed to the random variance in the direction of the fibers. So groom, I guess they mean steer the direction of the fibers. Interesting terminology. So it's important to note that there are types of fabrics that are still best modeled by hard surfaces. For example, leather, silk, and satin can be recreated using the standard or anisotropic material models. So getting into the cloth specular BRDF, the cloth specular BRDF we use is a modified microfacet BRDF as described by Ashikman and Primoz in this paper. In their work, they note that the distribution term is what contributes most to a BRDF, and that the shadowing and masking term is not necessary for their velvet distribution. The distribution term itself is an inverted Gaussian distribution. This helps achieve fuzz lighting, forward and backward scattering, while an offset is added to simulate the front-facing specular contribution. The so-called velvet NDF is defined as follows, where the diffuse term is, yeah, I gotta pull up the sheet again. I believe so. Yeah, I gotta pull up the sheet of the terminology, the glossary thing here. So I've got that to refer to. Yeah, maybe it's like because there's like crushed velvet, isn't there, where like it's kind of like a not exactly standing up, maybe mashed down some. Maybe that's what they're trying to model. Could be. Here, got this up here now. Okay. Yeah. So the C term is, what is the C term? C norm. They don't feel it's necessary to define that. Yeah, right.
Some constant, I think.
Yeah. So some sort of
Constant.
yeah. So we've got negative cotangent squared of the, is it the half angle? Half light angle? Oh. On here I've got I think H is, yeah, it's between L and V. So yeah, that half vector though. Yeah, so this NDF, what is NDF? I don't think they defined that. Did they? Normal distribution function. Gotcha. Yeah, let's try to get back. Okay, and then so this is a variant of the NDF of the same authors, described by the same authors. In this other paper, notably modified to include an offset and an amplitude. So some intensity factors, I guess. So in this other paper, they proposed a normalized version. So that's got some more terms. Yeah. So for the full specular Brdf, we now follow this other one and replace the traditional denominator with a smoother variant. So this is in terms of the normal vector and the view vector and the light vector. And then this term from above. So implementation of the velvet NDF given here. Optimized to properly fit in half floats and avoid computing the cotangent. Excuse me. Relying instead on trigonometric identities. Note that we remove the Fresnel component from this Brdf. Okay, so yeah, they've just got some special handling of, to keep things above zero. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting surface. Yeah, because it's a bunch of. Yeah, you're always hitting something at at 0 degrees there. Yeah, that's interesting. It's the yeah. So this other paper, Estevez and Kula proposed a different NDF called the Charlie Sheen, based on an exponentiated sinusoidal instead of the inverted Gaussian. So this NDF is appealing for several reasons. Its parameterization feels more natural and intuitive, and it provides a softer appearance, as shown in 49. Its implementation is simpler. So we've got roughness term, sine of the angle, raised to 1 over alpha. Then there's a new shadowing term that we omit here because of its cost. I guess that's a self-shadowing, maybe. And instead rely on the visibility term shown in equation 48. So that's probably n dot L. So implementation of this NDF is presented here. Optimized to properly fit in half floats. The Charlie Sheen. It's interesting. It's tiger blood material. Yeah, okay, so the sheen color, so we're looking at these highlights for better control of the appearance of cloth and give users the ability to recreate two-tone specular materials. We introduce the ability to directly modify the specular reflectance. This figure shows an example of using the parameter we call sheen color. So yeah, this is something that comes in close to that, what would be a grazing angle, I guess. So almost like a Fresnel term. So our cloth material model still relies on Lambertian diffuse. It is, however, slightly modified to be energy conservative, akin to the energy conservation of our clear coat, and offers an optional subsurface scattering term. This extra term is not physically based and can be used to simulate the scattering, partial absorption, and re-emission of light of certain types of fabrics. So we've got the diffuse term without the subsurface scattering, where f of VH is the Fresnel term of the cloth specular, and in practice we've opted to leave out this term from the diffuse component. This effect is a bit subtle and was deemed not to be worth the added cost. Subsurface scattering is implemented using the wrap diffuse lighting technique and is in its energy conserving form. So we've got n dot L with some kind of compensation term here. Clamped between 0 and 1, and then some constant for the subsurface plus that n dot L term again. So where W is a value between 0 and 1, it's finding how much the diffuse light should wrap around the terminator. Interesting. To avoid introducing another parameter, fix W to 0.5, so this will simplify to a constant. Note that with this wrap diffuse lighting, the diffuse term must not be multiplied by n dot L. The effect of this cheap subsurface scattering approximation can be seen in figure 32. So the left column versus white column with brown subsurface. So you can kind of see what they're talking about. looks different. I guess I wouldn't exactly call it subsurface, but it's, yeah, I guess that is. They're trying to model there. The complete implementation of our cloth Brdf, including sheen and subsurface scattering, is found here. So, taking the distribution of the normals, we've got the visibility term, yeah, and then computing everything here. So then we're looking at the parameterization of this model. The cloth material model encompasses all the parameters previously defined for the standard material model except for metallic and reflectance. 2 extra parameters in Table 8 are also available. That's the sheen and subsurface colors, where the sheen color is specular tint to create 2-tone specular fabrics, defaulting to 0.04 to match standard reflectance, and the subsurface color being the tint for the diffuse color after scattering and absorption through the material. So to create a velvet-like material, the base color can be set to black or a dark color, and chromaticity information should instead be set on the sheen color. So that's kind of yeah, okay. So it is, yeah, the Fresnel is almost reversed. It's kind of opposite from your normal incidence and grazing angle. It's kind of inverted almost. So to create more common fabrics such as denim, cotton, etc., use the base color chromaticity and use the default sheen color or set the sheen color to the luminance of the base color. I guess they use the sides of the fibers pointing outwards as the surface, I guess. Yeah, so it's kind of at a 90-degree angle. This is kind of their assumption. It's that the surface is at a 90-degree angle to what you would otherwise think of as the surface. It's kind of my interpretation there. Yeah, looking at pictures that doesn't exactly hold, but maybe it's good enough. Interesting. A face-to-face method of weaving. Weave 2 and then cut it in half. All right, do we want to continue with chapter 5 or?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The correctness and coherence of the lighting of the environment is paramount to achieving plausible visuals. After surveying the existing rendering engines such as Unity and Unreal, as well as traditional real-time rendering literature, it's obvious that coherency is rarely achieved. So in the Unreal Engine, for instance, let's artists specify the brightness of a point in lumens, a unit of luminous power. Brightness of directional lights, however, is expressed using an arbitrary unnamed unit, so they don't try to have these things be coherent. To match the brightness of a point light with luminous power of 5,000 lumens, the artist must use a directional light of brightness 10. This kind of mismatch makes it difficult for artists to maintain the visual integrity of a scene when adding, removing, or modifying lights, so it becomes very arbitrary, I guess. Yeah, using solely arbitrary units as a coherent solution is a coherent solution, but it makes reusing lighting rigs a difficult task. very subjective. So for instance, in outdoor scene, we'll use a directional light of brightness 10 as the sun, and all the other lights will be defined relative to that value. Moving these lights to an indoor environment would make them too bright. The goal, therefore, is to make all lighting correct by default, while giving artists enough freedom to achieve the desired look. We will support a number of lights split into two categories, direct and indirect. So direct is point lights, photometric lights, and area lights. I guess that's not image-based. So indirect lighting is image-based lights for both local and distant light probes. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think it's when you have like a lighting distribution function, like specified by, I don't know what there's like a interior lighting standard or something that you can look up the lighting profiles.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess it's relatively common in rendering software. Yeah, I don't know. So looking at units, if you want to talk about light, the following sections will discuss how to implement various types of light and their proposed equations. They make use of different symbols and units summarized in this table. So we have luminous power in units of luminans. We've got luminous intensity in candela or lumens per something, SR. We've got illuminance, which is lux or lumens per meter squared. Yeah, I'm curious what the definition of candela is. It's per unit solid angle, so that's a solid radian, I guess it would be. Okay, so luminance in nits is candelas per meter squared. Different than a lumen, I guess. Radiant power in watts. Luminous efficacy in lumens per watt, so that'd be maybe to model different types of light sources. Luminous efficiency as a percentage. So to get properly coherent lighting, must use light units that respect the ratio between various light intensities found in real-world scenes. These intensities can vary greatly from around 800 lumens for a household light bulb to 128,000 lux for daylight sky and sun illumination. So okay. So we've got a yeah. Yeah, okay, if you were considering the right, if you treated the sun as a point light, yeah, that makes sense, yeah. Yeah, because you're out at a real massive distance, and you still have a 1 over the distance squared term, or yeah. I would not. Your half floats would overflow, I think. Yeah, so easiest way to achieve lighting coherency is to adopt physical light units. This in turn enables full reusability of lighting rigs. So they're trying to achieve a coherency between their different types of lighting units. Physical light units also allows us to use a physically based camera. Maybe aperture and things like that. Table 10 shows the light unit associated with each type of light intended to support. So we've got a directional light that has units in luminance, lux or lumens per meter squared. So yeah, that's that idea of a sun, something like that. Point light, you're talking about the total amount of luminous power in lumens. Spotlights defined similarly. The mysterious photometric light is defined in terms of candela, which is per unit of, yeah, so this is maybe like a, instead of like a point light, it's a light that's defined like a cone, maybe, something like that. It's only part of a point light. I'm not exactly sure what the idea is there. We've got masked photometric light. Okay, that actually maybe makes sense. So it's a projector that still diverges. It's so not a directional light, but not really a point light either. Because a directional light would have no divergence, all the rays being parallel. I think the idea here being that this has some coverage of a solid angle. Not exactly sure there. Area lights with luminous power in lumens. Image-based lights in candela per meter squared. So even though commercially available light bulbs often display their brightness in lumens, it's common to refer to the brightness of a light bulb using its required energy in watts. This number of watts only indicates how much energy a light bulb uses, not how bright it is. It's even more important to understand this difference now that more energy efficient bulbs are readily available. So understanding the efficiency of the power in versus power out. Since artists might be accustomed to gauging the light's brightness by its power, we should allow users to use the power unit to define the brightness of a light. Conversion is presented here, where we've got the luminous efficacy of the light, which is going to scale the contribution of the light for a given input power. Knowing that the maximum luminous efficiency is 683 lumens per watt, we can also use luminous efficacy, or luminous efficiency V, also called the luminous coefficient, shown here. So that's, I guess, used in a very similar way. So that's a scale factor on the maximum possible efficiency. We've got another table here used as reference to convert watts to lumens using either luminous efficacy or the luminous efficiency of various types of lights. More specific values are available on the Wikipedia page. So incandescents have a relatively low efficiency, so we have a small amount of the power is actually released as luminous energy. Yeah, so it's power in versus power out is relatively low. LED is higher, and fluorescence kind of similar ranges. Curious to see what kinds of things they have on the Wikipedia page. Got for stars and things. Huh. Yeah, sure. So then we got, we've got tungsten light bulbs, class M stars, black bodies, at different temperatures, and ideal monochromatic sources. Now that's actually interesting because, oh, go ahead. Interesting. So read more about that. Huh. Yeah, it's high pressure sodium. Yeah, I've used those for plants a couple of times. Yeah, they, if you're around them too long, your eyes adapt to it, and when you go elsewhere, it looks really weird. Like, yeah, they've only got certain emission spectra that they operate on. That's, yeah, that's, let's read more about that. I was just going to mention that this peak here being at right around 6,500, if you've heard of the D65 standard for white, that refers to 6,500K as a daylight standard. I wonder if that has something to do with that luminous efficacy. Oh, all right, we got a lot more. Yeah, so yeah, your gas discharge, your high pressure sodium is going to be this one here. So maybe some values to use if you wanted to model these different behaviors in this context. Okay, so looking at validation of light units, is one of the big advantages of using physical lights. The units, it's the ability to physically validate our equations. We can use specialized devices and measure these light units. So that's the amount of things like lumens and candelas can be evaluated. To validate luminance, you can look at the amount of luminance reaching a surface by measuring with an incident light meter. For our tests, we use this unit shown here. So I guess that's looking at the amount of lux. Uses a white diffused dome to capture the luminance reaching a surface, and it's important to orient the dome properly depending on the desired measurement. So, for example, orienting the dome perpendicular to the sun on a bright day will give a very different result to turning at 90 degrees and orienting it horizontally. So luminance at a surface, or the product of the incident light and the surface, that's maybe the reflected light, can be measured using a luminance meter, often called a spot meter. While incident light meters use a diffuse hemisphere to capture light from all directions, spot meter uses a shield to measure incident light from a single direction. Some kind of lens system going on. Yeah, for our tests, we're looking at a different unit that can replace the diffuser and measure luminance in a 5-degree cone. Okay, so I guess it's focusing light from a particular direction onto the sense element. Okay, so luminous intensity of a light source cannot be measured directly, but can be derived from the measured illuminance if we know that the distance between the measuring device and the light, if we know that distance between the device and the light source. Equation 54 is a simple addition with the inverse square law discussed in 5.2.2. Where I is what? I is the luminous intensity, so that's per angle. Okay, yeah, that makes sense then. So that's the energy. That's E. Illuminance. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Right. So if you've ever seen the idea of the inverse square law, it comes up a lot in things like signals. If you ever take any electrical engineering type of stuff, like this kind of idea of your intensity per unit surface area goes down as you get farther away, because you're dealing with a surface area of a sphere basically as it gets farther and farther out. Right, because this is a per angle term here, so it's kind of a it's what is it? Per solid radian. Yeah. So I guess that comes out, that works out. Directional lights.
5.2 is very long, so maybe let's stop here.
Okay, cool. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, let's just do 5.2 next time.
Cool.
And I need to drop off, sorry, folks.
Cool.